We'll get some video on the straight putt. We're not going to be able to do that on the breaking putts. But let's then look at his data, look at Sam data. Let's look how the club is moving. Let's see how that pattern changes or doesn't change on the breaking putts. And let's try and relay all of that to what we spoke about this morning in the theory session. So how long have you used this putter?
3 months.
3 months, okay. So if I put this putter in shaft plane, okay, know the putter previously? The putter that we saw in the studio twisted, didn't it? So this is effectively lie angle balanced. So when you hold this putter in shaft plane, the face doesn't want to twist. Okay, and I'll talk about the impacts, implications of that if we need to. Okay, right. So, Matthias, talk to me a little bit about your putting. If you had an uphill straight putt, what would be the putt that you would fear missing? Would you fear missing to the right, missing to the left, or could it be either? You'd fear that you would miss the putt to the left. Okay. And typically, do you then miss more putts left than you would right? You would miss more putts left than right. Okay. Right. So I'm going to calibrate Sam. We're going to get you up. We're going to hit a few putts, and then we're going to switch the putts round. Okay. Okay, a couple more. Okay, right, perfect, that's great, thank you. Right, so I just want to do one test with you. And I'm going to align this device. So this is a T-line device that we spoke about earlier in the perception test. Your coach mentioned more about aiming right. You talk about missing left. Okay, so let's do a perception test. Let's try and understand what the student sees in case that influences orientation in either aim or the stroke. So I'm going to use the laser. Right, so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take your setup to the side of the tee line and just place the putter down just to the side so you're not going to touch or knock it, and then get into a comfortable position as if we were ready to strike the ball down this device. Okay, like we had an imaginary ball on the device and we were going to roll the ball down. So imagine, picture the ball rolling down that tee line. When I move out the way, I want you to look down to the target and ask yourself where that line points. So look down the target line.
Mihin se näyttää sun mielestä se viiva nyt, kun sä katsot, kun sä oot siinä paikallaan? Näyttääkö se suoraan vai näyttääkö se sun mielestä jopa kumpaan suuntaan?
A little bit left. Okay, so whereabouts? If you look at the board on the back, where would you say that aims?
Mihin kohtaa siellä? Number 1.
Number 1, left edge. Okay. Right, so give me the club, stay there, stay in your posture. Move slightly further away from the ball for me. We'll stand. Okay. Tuck your chin down. Now look down the line. Where does that look? Does it change or look in the same place? Where does it look?
It's straight.
Look straight.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So I'm going to give you your club back. And where's his coach? Oh, there. Okay. Right. What I think would be appropriate now is so we're going to go through this data as a group, go through the analysis, what we see, talk about it. So I think it's appropriate that the student isn't here, and we can relay that information to you, and you can, So, Matthias, thank you very much. Round of applause for him. Bit nerve-wracking. Well done. But I think we've got a few things to work on there, and as a group we're going to go through this as an experiment, but I think there's some definite things we can draw upon. As we're trying to get the laptop linked up to the screen, what observation, with the student's not in sight now? Okay. What observations did you make of that student? So he spoke about having a right aim, or coach spoke about having a right aim, and the student in particular talked about missing left, didn't he? Fearing a left. So what observations did you make without having access to the SAM Putt Lab about the student on the straight putt, the right to left and the left to right? So, did anyone observe anything? No? Nothing? Okay. So on the right to lefter, he aimed a lot further right than he intended to. Okay. Did anyone get a sense of his aim on the straight putt or the left to right putt?
Straight putt was still right.
Straight putt was a little right. Okay, and what about the left to right one? Anyone see that? A little difficult on that side. Left edge. Okay, so fairly tight, but a slightly left bias, if anything. Okay, there's a slight right bias on the straight, slight left bias on the left to right, and a big right bias on the right to left. Did anyone notice about the rotation of the putter? So in stroke dynamics this morning, we spoke about the club face being the most important thing. That determines direction. And obviously how that club face moves during the stroke is going to have a big impact on how you deliver that. So did anyone notice about the rotation profile of the player? How the club face worked during the stroke? Is it high rotation? Okay, or was it low rotation? We gave you an example this morning of high rotation stroke, low rotation. Okay. Would you say in a continuum of smooth to violent, in the smoothness of that rotation, where would that be? I would say it wasn't at the smooth end. Okay, so his rotation looked very inconsistent, particularly through the putt. You could see that there's a lot of hand action, a lot of hand movement during the putt. And Coach, you mentioned he struggled, didn't you? And we don't have the screen now, is that okay? Right, well, okay. What we're going to do, we're going to have to run it off the laptop. On the straight putt, we had 1 degree of aim on average. Okay, so 1 degree on a 10-foot putt is the edge of the hole. Then we had, on average, 0.7 degrees of opening. But what you can see is the face at impact was very inconsistent. It was various degrees. Okay, so we've got an inconsistent rotation. Sometimes that came in fairly square, and then other times it came in open. Okay, if we looked at the path of the stroke, the dotted line is the takeaway, the solid line is the follow through. We can see the dotted line and the solid line aren't quite matched up. So to me, that player looks like he sets it up out the toe and then hits it more out the middle. But the path direction itself, okay, if you look at the path direction, in fact, I'm going to bring up a different style report here, it'll be easy to see. There we go. So the path itself was 1.3 degrees left at impact. Now the path itself as an amount of error is a very small amount of error. That's going to have very little influence on the direction that the ball is going to travel in. The path itself and how it travels, is that symmetrical? Is that, if we think of the dotted line being the takeaway and the solid line being the follow through, if that's an indication of how the sweet spot travels, we can see that the shape of that stroke's changing. It's fairly straight back and inside, and it's going out and then around. So it's not a symmetrical motion, likely because the radius is changing all the time, and that radius is what determines the three-dimensional path. That determines the symmetry, the arc itself, that three-dimensional arc. Fairly consistent. Strikes were pretty good. Okay, we've got a rise angle of 3.4 degrees up, and we've got some added loft of 0.7. So depending upon the loft of the putter will depend on the launch conditions that we have. If he had a 3 degree lofted putter, that loft at impact is then higher than the rise angle. So we'd get some element of backspin and launch. So if we look at rotation now, you can see immediately red. Okay, so the biggest concern would be the consistency on the right hand side. So we've got a really low rate of consistency. And you could classify that as close to being a yip. So, what we've got here is we look at the amount of rotation going back, 3.7 degrees. Right, so we've got 3.7 degrees going back, which is, it's not a massive amount of rotation. It's in, I would categorize that within a low rotation stroke. Oh, yeah. Well done. Right. Oh, gonna relax now. So we've got a fairly low rotation stroke, and then through impact you can see the player is really sort of like holding that club off. And through impact we've actually got opening, and at the end of the stroke we can see opening. So I mentioned the word symmetry, you know, earlier on today, and if you looked at like whatever aspect, whether it's torso movement, arm motion, wrist motion, symmetry is a good thing because symmetry matches things up at impact. And if you look at the symmetry of that rotation, there isn't any. It's very unsymmetrical. So I would say it's a fairly strong club face, starts to close, starts to open through impact. So it's looking at why that is the case. So we'll look at the video and we'll try and identify that. So timing, 1.76. So that falls under the 2-to-1 ratio. So the player potentially has a lot of load. You would look at the timing of the backswing and say it's on the brisk side, 614 milliseconds. The stroke for that length of putt wasn't short. Got a shorter follow through than in terms of backswing length. Fairly brisk, so you can see how the timing then may slow down, and we've got a ratio under 2. But if we look at the dynamics, impact are these black lines. So is the player accelerating or decelerating? That black line represents the rate of acceleration at impact. So 0 would be no acceleration. Anything above would be positive acceleration. Anything below would be deceleration. So you can see this player is actually decelerating slightly. It was the opposite of what we saw in the lecture room. Why would they decelerate? Well, they've got so much energy in the club going back from the speed and the length that they're going to try and take speed out. If you look at the acceleration here on this screen, you can see the sharpness in the acceleration going back. How quickly that peaks. Did anyone notice about his wrist motion in the stroke? Okay, going back. Anyone notice anything going back? Right. So what we've got is a club face that, to me, is quite strong. He talks about being hitting pulls. I could see him hitting pulls possibly on a golf course. Okay, because you see he's trying to hold it off. Is there a reason for him trying to hold off? Let's look at the right to left, left to right puts. Now he's in a slightly different environment. Does that stress him differently? So he picks a target that's about a cup outside on quite a strong slope. He then aims on average 4 degrees right of that. And where did he miss most of his putts? Low. On average, the closing was 0.6. So now you can start to see that there can be some closing. Is 0.6 enough in order for him to miss the putts as far left as he did? I would say no from that distance. So his putt there was missed because of read. He never read enough. I mean, clearly the read he chose was way low. His instinct, his intuitive sense of the read was way closer to the actual read, wasn't it? So his feel over the ball was pretty good, but just not quite good enough. So the path, 2.8 degrees to the right, so it's slightly left of his aim. Strike doesn't get as consistent. Rotation, still struggling with the rotation. Consistency. Let's look at the dynamics. Same pattern, a little bit brisker. Less consistency and acceleration. So it's the same pattern, but we've gotten on a more difficult putt, and we see a little bit more variability, but fundamentally the same pattern. Get him on the left to right. So he underread the putt, aimed left of it, then pulled it. Okay, pulled it more. There's a few pulls if we go through individually. 1.4 closing, 1.9 closing, there's a 2 degree pull now. 0.5 closing. So he hit better putts on the left or right. He probably would have holed 1 or 2, wouldn't he? So he's underread it because the line that he chose is not the line that he hit it on, and the line he hit it on often went in. So he's underread it. Now if he'd been a good aimer on a breaking putt, he'd have missed that significantly low. But luckily for him, he has an over-aim bias, as we can clearly see on the right to left putt. So he aims way higher, but he's probably got a slight right aim bias as well. So now he doesn't look like he's aiming as left on the left or righter, because those two biases start to work together. But now he's got to pull it in order for him to hold it. And now he can let that club face go. He's not trying to fight it. And now he pulls it. So you see through impact there's less holding off on the left or righter. Okay. So I would say that player's pattern is the same. It just gets stressed on certain putts, or sometimes he can let things go and it can function better on other putts. So you probably fight to pull. On the left or righter, great, I can pull that up the slope. The right to lefter, probably got to aim really high. So now we've got to try and work out what are the mechanics doing to influence, I would say, the rotation of the stroke. Because on the 1 degree on the straight putt, it's not drastic error, it's not too bad. And there's a couple of putts he aimed it quite well. But we see more of a possible pull bias, and he talks a lot about maybe missing putts left. So I wonder whether he aims right because of a pull. But what did we notice about the visual test? Where did the straight line look, left or right? It looked left. So where might you want to aim if a straight line looked left? Right. When we changed his head position, I got him further away and I increased the neck bend. And where did he say it looked straighter? So that's just whether we need to do that or not, I don't know. But that was a demonstration that when you change the head position, you can influence perception, and as a consequence, that could then influence aim. So let's bring up some video. Interesting thing with the video, he took that long over the ball, the timing of the video cut out, so it missed some of the strokes. He spends a long time over the ball, like there's a lot of conscious thought going on there. But I can normally capture the video. People have hit the putt.
Might be also the group watching him.
No doubt, yeah. So yeah, this is one of the ones that I couldn't capture. Okay, so draw a few lines here. So, a few observations about the player's setup. What could anyone notice? Draw a line through the center of his body. So if I draw a line through the center of his body, it falls quite a long way back in his stance. So which would indicate he's got a bit of weight on his right hand side. So that places the ball position quite well forward relative to the centre of his body, the anatomical references. So ball forward, pull bias. I would, with the ball forward, it's easier to pull than with the ball back. So it's a simple setup issue to look at. If we look down the line, we can see his eye position is outside, and I would say that if you looked at like that 30-degree central vision, it's likely going to fall slightly outside. So as soon as we influence the neck bend and eye position, we could get him to see straighter. That could be a component to look for. If we look at forward bend and arm position, what do we notice? What do we see about that? What would, from an aesthetics point of view, let's look at aesthetics. got very straight arms. So his arms are pulled forward and locked out. So he's protracted in his shoulders. And then from here, if we look at the side view, right, so I'm going to go through that blend. So in the takeaway, to me, that lead wrist works this way. Now, if you have some Putt Lab, one of the pretty good things to look at is this 3D. And it gives us a very good view of the club. So if I twist the view so I'm looking right down the shaft, then we get a very good view of the shaft plane. So from here now, can we see the rotation in plane, the rotation out of plane, and the rotation about the plane? It gives us a very good view. And the one thing that I would say that you're looking at here is the symmetry of the motion within those different axes. So I'll just play it. So what do we see in terms of the club there? Well, if you release the club face, he'd pull the shit out of it. So, yeah, he can't. So if you look at the butt of the club, it really doesn't travel very far, does it? The club face gets ahead of the club. If you look at the video, how would you classify his grip? Neutral, strong, or weak? Okay, so strong grip, flexion and ulnar. Tell me how that club face feels now. It's going to feel shut. And I think that's where his problem lies. So now you can see the handle's leading, handle gets getting higher and towards the right. That's likely to manage the strike slightly. And now he's trying to, you can see about the shaft twist now, where that toe's starting to open. There you go. Let's look at the video. So primarily wrist, arms, torso doesn't move much. And then a missed impact. that would be the analysis of the player. On a straight putt, some idea of the pattern, get him on the right to left putt, get him on the left to right putt, see how that pattern is affected by being stressed. You also get an idea of how he might micromanage his direction through his read or aiming bias on a breaking putt. Ultimately, the player has an issue with rotation. It's inconsistent. So he is able to leave a few open. He's also able to pull and close it. And that will be very dependent upon the situation or impacted by his accuracy of read, accuracy of aim. The first thing that I would say we need to do there is stabilize the rotation, give him a stability in terms of the club face. And I would say that comes from his wrist sequence going back. I would also say he doesn't have enough forward bend. His putt is too short for him and his arms are too locked out. So from a locked out, protracted, it's very easy just to use your arms here. And if he could get into slightly more forward bend, get a little bit more arm connection, shoulders, scaps just sat back a little bit, that would encourage naturally a little bit more rotation with the torso. And then I'd be trying to get him to synchronize the movement of the handle with then the movement of the torso, hands and arms. Very simple drill that you could do would be to stick a T-peg, break a T-peg or get some blue tack or some sticky device on the top of the club, stick a T-peg in there, and then the T-peg just touching his wrist. If he hinges his wrist, the T-peg's going to dig in. I'd also look at changing the player's grip. I would look at getting the grip more neutral and more into the palm. And I think that position is going to encourage more extension and less flexion. And also with it being more neutral, as it flexes, it's not going to twist under and shut. So that's where I would go with that student. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to do that, and whether I'm proven right or wrong, you don't know until you make those changes and how the student responds to the changes. But in some way, shape or form, you need to manage the rotation. Now, likely because of the mechanics of that backswing and the trouble he's got himself in, there's some element of tremor in that stroke. And it could be, is he right-handed or left-handed? Okay, so if he has a yip, which is then something more deeper and neurologically embedded, then his yip will likely be in his right hand. I've never seen anyone that's not had a yip in the dominant hand. So if that was the case, I'd still go through all the same procedures that we've said, but I would possibly then explore changing his right hand grip to maybe something like a pencil or claw or one of those others, just to flip the switch. Because for me, with players with that kind of yip tendency, taking the dominant hand and completely doing something different with it seems to kind of rewire things. But you still, I think, with a player like that if it is embedded into a slight yip, it's likely come from poor mechanics. And then coordination, hand-eye coordination, and that breaks down. So fix the mechanics, let's see what comes from the mechanics, and then your next resort, if we've still got some instability in the face, would be to change the right hand grip. I probably don't think it would do him any harm to alter his head position. The one thing about the bend, as soon as you get more forward bend here, you're going to get more forward bend in your neck. So just managing distance from the ball and with forward bend in the torso, you're going to get him seeing a straighter line, and I don't think that's going to hurt him. And I think that he'd be able to manage his aim better. But I think a big issue comes from the rotation. Does anyone have any questions on that? Does that kind of make sense? Would you be in agreement, or would you see something different within that? Any questions at all? The synergy is the hard part, putting it together. And one thing that I always try and do is I try and think of a plan, and I'd use the evidence from all that data that we've taken. I'd use the evidence from that to try and generate the plan. So the plan will be grip, posture, head position, take out the flexion, and the grip alignment and the flexion causes the shutness, yeah. So the grip, posture, that's the plan. But ultimately, until you actually get the student in those positions and working along those lines, you really don't know how they're going to respond. Sometimes it's like peeling a layer of onion. You peel it and then something else appears. So having adaptability and being able to go off track, but your main aim either way is to try and stabilise a rotation.
How about the putter? They just got that one fitted when I was gone, so.
Well, the fitting, if you stand as you want to stand, as he stands, it fits him.
Yeah.
The reality is it constrains him into a position that's probably not good for him. So that putter, when you put it in shaft plane, it's lie angle balanced. So when you place a force out of plane, it doesn't twist. But the reason how they do that, they shove all weight in the heel, forward and in the heel. So the actual centre strikes on that putter are not centre. If you measure that putter when you hit out the middle, it will twist because the CG is effectively inside the line of the shaft and the sweet spot, because they've tricked the putter in order to stay lie angle balanced by moving the weight. So the weight sits under the shaft and in line with the shaft. So when you do that, it won't move. But if I was to push that shaft in plane, that would twist slightly. A face balanced putter wouldn't. So I can't say I'm a massive fan of the putter, but more than anything, I think the length doesn't help him. That would be the main thing. So I would get him into a more forward bend, improve his arm position to get a little bit more connection, like I say, shoulder position, scap position, and then fit him for whatever length that encourages. And what I would say is get my email off Petri or Hank, and if you want to send some videos or anything like that, then feel free and I'll try and help you work towards those changes. Okay. Right. Any questions on that? I think we have another set of data to collect. Hank, do we have another? We're going to collect someone else? Okay.